Today's number one. The United Arab Emirates will send its first ever athlete to the Winter Olympics this weekend. An alpine skier who learned to ski in a Dubai shopping mall. True story. I absolutely love the Winter Olympics. It's the first time where I can scream at a woman, "Sweep harder," during the curling event and not be called a sexist. What do you think, Ed?
You didn't really give me time to laugh. Just immediately, what do you think? You got to give it a moment. This is what they teach you in comedy school. You got to wait a beat and wait for the audience.
Was that what they teach you in comedy school? You're talking to most comical at university, high school. So, and bitch, the reason I was a virgin until 19 and not till 40 is because of this rocket sense of humor.
You can always improve. You can always be better, no matter how good you are.
Well, the Winter Olympics play an important social role. It's important that there's a sport or an event where only white people are allowed to play that sports that no one else can afford to learn. So
that's true. That's not a joke. That's just a fact.
Deep. That was social commentary in the form of humor. How are you, Ed?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm fucking exhausted. I'm doing this. I don't know if you've heard, but
you seem a little out of breath.
I kind of started a movement. And I'm about to go on Jake Tapper. And then, anyways, I unsubscribed. I know you want to know more about me. I unsubscribed from Uber last night. And by the way, I love Uber. This was a tough one. And when you unsubscribe, which I'm sure you've already done as you want to be part of this movement, and not just virtue signal all the fucking time, you little hipster Brooklyn sandal-eyed weirdo. But I unsubscribed from Uber, and the last screen you see, it tells you how many Uber Eats you've ordered and how many Uber rides you've taken. Okay, guess how many times I've ordered from Uber Eats?
I think it's got to be like 1,000. Am I going too high?
37. I'm not a big food delivery guy, and I usually use Caviar for some reason. I'm used to the interface. In the last 10 years, how many Ubers have I taken?
That's got to be over 1,000 for sure.
3,756. And I did some research. All right, so this is what big tech does. Big tech comes in with a value proposition where they charge you $20 for an Uber that costs them $40. They try and consolidate the market, and then they slowly but surely start raising prices. So I take Uber Lux. The average Uber Lux ride in 2015 was between $40 and $60. Today, by the way, Uber has raised its prices once they consolidated the market 7 to 10% a year, twice or treble times the rate of inflation. Now the average Uber Lux ride is $80 to $120. So 350 rides a year at an average price of about $100, because I'm usually going back and forth from the airport. I am spending every year $35,000 on Uber. That's true. And I realize this is a story of privilege, but what I've decided is I canceled.
Clip that now.
I canceled Uber. I've been taking the tube and the subway in New York, which are incredible. I don't know if you knew this, but there's tunnels underground and these cars go through them on tracks. And they get you where you need to go for like $2 or $3. They're seriously amazing. Some weird people, and also the people aren't that hot on the train. That's the only thing I would suggest fixing. We need more hot people on the trains.
Yeah, they could make a hot girls train, maybe. That would fix things.
Or hot dudes. I'm fine with the hot guys. I go to Equinox. At this point, I just want hot. So I figured out with the money I'm going to save, no joke, I could lease, including parking and insurance, with the money I'm going to save, having canceled my Uber account, I could lease a Mercedes G-Wagon, the new BMW i7, or a Range Rover with the money I'm saving. This is all a long-winded way of saying, go to Resist and Unsubscribe, and you will find out just how much money you are spending on different tech platforms that have slowly but surely increase their pricing, and you don't realize how much it's costing you. Anyways, I'm getting, just to really stick it to the man, I'm going to go buy a Range Rover.
But here's the question, because, how are you getting around? Are you switching to Lyft? Because I know you're doing this thing where you have two different subscriptions and you get rid of one of them. Is that what you're doing here?
I'm not exaggerating. I've been taking the tube and the subway, and I've been doing this awful thing called Uber X, where they have like air freshener and shitty cars and
wait, hold on.
Oh my God.
You're still taking Ubers, it's just you downgraded?
No, I do the Lyft, the cheap Lyft one.
Okay.
Lyft, it's called Lyft Walmart or something, or Lyft Lyft, life has not worked out the way I'd hoped. And a guy who doesn't know how to use Waze and is on an Android phone. God, I sound like such a douchebag right now. But I've been taking the subway. It's incredible.
Good stuff. $35,000. That's pretty good.
So anyways, I'm going one by one. Uber was the tough one. I'm excited about that one. I'm doing Paramount Plus tonight. Tomorrow I'm going to do Apple TV Plus. I did Amazon Prime on Friday. That wasn't hard. I don't order that much from Amazon. But anyways.
I'm shocked to hear that.
Yeah, I don't buy a lot from Amazon. What have you unsubscribed from, given I know that how emotionally invested you are in this movement?
I haven't unsubscribed yet, but I'm happy to hear from you what you think I should unsubscribe from. I could maybe go between Lyft and Uber.
Hold on, one second, Ed. 1 second. Memo to file, Ed Elson, review and compensation. Does not act like an owner, is poor for morale. Music does not match the words. It's disappointing our audience.
We'll see how disappointed everyone is.
Let me get this. Your boss and a person you constantly say I'm your role model has started a movement and you have yet to unsubscribe from anything. Do I have that right?
You did get that right. Yeah.
And by the way, none of this comes for free. We just lost an advertiser who rhymes with Snapple. And I lost another telco advertiser that rhymes with Mint Mobile. Anyways, nothing's for free, Ed. Courage is like, it's really great you're finding your virtue all of a sudden, but we're not down with that. And so, yeah, nothing's for free. Nothing's for free. Anyways. All right, let's get to our guest, Ed.
All right, here's our conversation with Neera Tanden, President and CEO of the Center for American Progress. Neera, thank you for joining us on Prof G Markets.
Thanks for having me.
So I just want to start with a quick bio of who you are. So you are the CEO of the Center for American Progress. You've also worked in the White House. You were the director for the Domestic Policy Council under Biden. You also helped to create the Affordable Care Act under Obama. You are a Democrat, but you have just plainly had a lot of experience in policy. So we want to focus on affordability in this episode and the policies that we're seeing from the administration so far. But just based on your experience, having worked in the White House, having worked as a policy maker, how would you rate the performance of this administration 1 year in?
I think the first and foremost thing for any administration to do is to figure out how to do no harm. In that arena, the administration has definitely failed. What is, kind of stark is that at a time where people are concerned about really making ends meet, the administration's cornerstone policy is tariffs, and those tariffs raise the cost of goods for, most Americans, a lot of small businesses, and just increase costs overall in the economy. But it's also important to remember that tariffs are essentially a version of a sales tax that is really disproportionately impacting kind of working class, poor Americans. So I think on affordability writ large, the real challenge for the administration is that it's making the problem worse. And when you really go beyond just goods like groceries or just buying like soccer balls at your local Target to, things like healthcare, it's an even starker picture. So President Trump is the first president in my lifetime who has actually successfully taken healthcare away from people. He's the One Big Beautiful Bill Act will increase costs for millions of Americans by ensuring they don't have health insurance. The whole debate on premium tax credits, the Affordable Care Act, premium tax credits is also fundamentally about affordability as well. So I'm going to go with an F.
Saw that coming.
I know that might shock people. That might be, it just was like, I was really changing it up there. But yeah, I'm going with a failing grade.
I was expecting a D coming in. We went straight to the F. So there's a lot of different domains to dig into here. I want to dig into housing for a moment. We saw two kind of remarkable interactions last week. I'm just going to play these two clips for you, and I'd love to get your reactions.
There's so much talk about, we're going to drive housing prices down. I don't want to drive housing prices down. I want to drive housing prices up for people that own their homes. And they can be assured that's what's going to happen.
We are going to give guidance at some point to see what is a mom and pop. That someone, maybe your parents for their retirement, bought 5, 10, 12 homes. So we don't want to push the mom and pops out. We just want to push everyone else out.
I mean, those two clips really made the rounds. I think the clip that I'd really like to get your reaction to is Trump saying that he actually wants housing prices to go up, which is quite remarkable because it seemed that he's been trying to present that he wants to address housing affordability. He's come up with some proposals that we can get into, but then he comes out and he just says outright, no, I want them to go up. What do you make of that clip? How relevant and important actually is it? What does it mean for affordability writ large?
We get a lot of conversation from Donald Trump, but every once in a while, he will just honestly tell you what he thinks about an issue. And I think this is really one of those areas. And, for people who understand housing in America, one of the big challenges is that it's a difficult issue, right? Because people who have bought a house, a lot of people's wealth in America is in their house. And so a lot of incumbents like to keep the people who already own a home, like to actually keep housing values up and sometimes oppose the development of additional housing in their neighborhoods, et cetera. But we're really living through one of the problems with that whole system, which is today, the average age of a first-time home buyer in the United States is 40 years old. Rents went up 30% from 2020 to 2023, and they've stabilized since then. And in some markets, they're coming down, but people overall have got a rent shock and a housing shock. And I think it really does say a lot about the president, which is, I think, the people he talks to on a regular basis, maybe the wealthiest Americans, really want to keep housing values up because it is key to their wealth. But for working class Americans, middle class Americans who are trying to buy a home or trying to just make ends meet by having an affordable rent, to say that you don't want any more housing means you want housing prices to go up. You want to make it harder to buy that home. You want to make it harder to afford the rent. That is what that means. And, I think it's just kind of a classic thing here, which is on tariffs, on this policy, on so much more. The great irony here is the president is making life a lot harder economically for working class, middle class Americans.
Do you think that quote actually means that we are going to have a policy under Trump of not building more housing? Because, I guess something that's been interesting to me is I thought that there were just debates over I thought we all agreed we want to get housing prices down. And then the debate or the divergence was like, how do you do that? Do you do it by addressing interest rates? Do you go out and buy mortgage bonds as Trump has proposed? Or do you, he's even proposed that institutional investors can't buy single family homes. Do you just build more housing? That's been the whole abundance thing coming from Ezra Klein. And yet then he just says outright, no, actually, that's not our difference of opinion here. I want them to go up. Does that mean that we're actually going to see policies, you think, that will actually increase the price of housing intentionally? Is that what that means?
My interpretation of what happened here is the president might have been talking about lowering housing costs because his advisors tell him to say he wants to lower housing costs. It is a really deep concern for Americans. It's a really deep concern for young people, like people who are trying to buy their first home. People are in their 30s, 40s. It's like a lot of his constituents, it's people who voted for Donald Trump think housing is too high. So I think that is why his political advisors had told him that. And then I think maybe he was at Mar-a-Lago on a Saturday night where a bunch of really rich people said, well, more housing means that in my neighborhood, in like Scarsdale or wherever people live, we would have more housing. And that nobody wants that. Nobody wants more housing in my neighborhood. Nobody wants to devalue like my house. And I think this is an issue where you kind of have to choose. I mean, this is an issue about policymaking. And when you work in policy, you have to make a choice, oftentimes between two different groups. And, I thought that clip kind of just, in a way, perfectly captured the president's interest, which has been a hallmark of his administration, which is to do what he needs to do for his supporters, donors, network, whatever you want to call it.
We'll be right back after the break, and if you're enjoying the show so far, send it to a friend, and please follow us if you haven't already. We're back with Prof G Markets. I think one thing that I always find, and that we always find whenever we try to dig into healthcare, is we try to figure out why are healthcare costs still so high? Why are they so much higher in America? And then we kind of do the digging, and then it always comes around to some answer of, there's a lot of just complexity in the middle somewhere. There's the pharmacy benefit managers, there's the insurance companies. No one can see eye to eye on this stuff. The whole thing is just it's really complicated. That's the explanation. Could you just give us a 101 on what is going on with healthcare policy in America right now, and why hasn't America really gotten its act together in terms of bringing healthcare costs down?
The way I bottom line healthcare costs in America is the per unit cost of things in America is much more expensive. Going to a doctor, getting a medical device, getting a surgery is much more expensive here than in Europe or other places. Just anything you do is a lot more expensive in the United States. And the reason why it is a lot more expensive in the United States is essentially you have a variety of forces, hospitals, insurers, PBMs, drug benefit managers like middlemen, the drug companies, all very few of those forces are transparent. And so the fractured system allows a bunch of people to drive up costs. A big area where things are just much more expensive in the United States is hospital care. And those hospitals often have a monopoly. And no individual group is has enough market power to really drive costs effectively down. So it's a very inflationary system. So I don't have a much better answer than it's complex, and that's what makes it more expensive. But essentially you have a system that is super fractured, and in a way, everyone looks at somebody else to be transparent. What we should do is have everyone be transparent. The hospital should be really clear on what it costs. And, I do think that there is an additional problem in the United States, which is because people don't have health insurance, there are a bunch of forces, like hospitals shift costs. I mean, we've insured a lot of people in the United States, particularly after the ACA, but there are some people who still don't have coverage, and they shift costs to others to sort of pay for that. So it's two complicated things. But what we should do is have radical transparency everywhere, get rid of the PBMs. There's a lot of self-dealing in the system as well, and that would make it a lot better.
What could government do about this? What I'm getting is all of this fractured system, all of these independent actors, everyone's blaming it on each other, pointing fingers, being opaque. I feel like that's exactly the domain of the government, to get in there and just figure it out. What would that look like?
There are states that have done really effective things, and I'll give an example. So it's to use the power of the government, not to set price caps, but to basically try to negotiate with all the insurers. Insurance is regulated in the United States basically at the state level for the most part. And so very similar to the German model, where you have kind of bargaining between all the employers and all the insurers that the government kind of oversees to set lower prices for insurance. And they do the same thing with hospitals. And essentially, it helps bring the whole price system down by taking negotiating power and concentrating it. And this is why I think it's important for Medicare to negotiate drug prices, because you have something that has a lot of market power, able to match the power of like near monopoly prescription drug companies. So I think, other countries have used that model. Other countries have also done single payer, but in a system that's going to be, that you imagine, short of single payer, having the government help basically negotiate with employers and like bring all the employers together and renegotiate rates down in a way where companies can still be profitable, but you actually are concerned about consumer costs as well. I think that's an important step.
What is this administration doing on healthcare policy that you think is either a good idea or a bad idea? I think the one thing that I'm kind of interested in particularly is Trump RX. And from my understanding, it's, this policy to theoretically get the cost of drugs down. That's also part of his whole great healthcare plan. The details are like not very clear as to what he's actually going to do there. But just on healthcare, what do you make of what this administration has either gotten done or not gotten done so far?
The Trump administration is trying to lower healthcare costs and actually lower the level of federal payments to Medicare Advantage plans. So the Trump administration recently, tried to put the brakes on some overpayments to Medicare Advantage, which Medicare Advantage is a private insurance in the Medicare system, which historically has been, overcharging the federal government vis-a-vis, like much more than, it pays for traditional Medicare, fee-for-service Medicare that the government is just handling. So that's it. That's one area. And Trump RX, look, basically the Democrats in Congress passed Medicare drug negotiation. They have not undone that. And in some ways, it seems like they're trying to act like they're building on that by lowering drug costs. But, whatever, that's good. It's good that this is an area where they are trying to continue that work. And there are plenty of areas they're not continuing important, good work. So, I think that's a really important step. I think the fact is that even Donald Trump recognizes Americans pay more for drugs, prescription drugs, than anywhere else in the world. And we do that at the same time where we spend the most money on research for prescription drugs. So consumers are paying on both ends. And I'm glad he's trying to take some steps there.
We'll be right back. And for even more markets insights, sign up for our newsletter at profgmarkets.com/subscribe.
Support for the show comes from Fundrise. For the past 70 years, there's been a room in finance that most people couldn't enter, a room where you could have invested in some of the biggest names in tech, companies including Airbnb and Uber, before their multi-billion-dollar IPOs. I'm talking about venture capital. But unless you had millions of dollars and the right connections, the door to the venture capital room was closed. You were stuck waiting in line with everyone else. But recently, Fundrise took a sledgehammer to that door when they launched their venture capital product and made it available to anyone with a minimum investment of just $10. Fundrise says their mission is to give everyone the chance to invest in the best tech and AI companies before they go public. Visit fundrise.com/ProfG to check out Fundrise's venture portfolio and start investing in minutes. All investments involve risk, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance is not indicative of future results. This is a paid advertisement.
We're back with Prof G Markets.
I want to take advantage of the fact that you are sort of at the intersection of kind of a think tank. Is that how you would describe your group right now? Policy group, think tank?
Yes, I would say the Center for American Progress is an action-oriented think tank.
An action tank. And the fact you've worked in the Obama administration, you have a solid understanding of economics. What I want to do is sort of a lightning round here. I want to propose a series of policy ideas and get your sort of quick 30,000-foot action-oriented reaction. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
single payer or national health care?
If America could start over again, there'd be a lot of benefits to single payer. It works well in other countries, but it would be a radical transformation today. So I support more of a public option to people that would create competition for insurance companies, and they'd actually have to compete on lowering costs vis-a-vis the government.
Mass distribution of GLP-1 drugs.
That would be great. I mean, GLP-1 drugs are, they have many facets. One of which is the drug companies just kind of discovered, like, they basically struck gold with these drugs. They weren't expecting to, they didn't invest to have this kind of benefit. They are exceedingly expensive. They have huge costs, huge health implications. They would make Americans' lives much, much better on a whole range of issues. We're discovering health, sleeping, heart conditions, as well as weight loss. So it would be fantastic to get wide distribution and much cheaper price.
Federally mandated minimum wage of $25 an hour.
I think, we're looking at things like a $20 an hour. I think the most important thing to think about here is how you set a wage that people can live on and do it in a way that creates more job opportunities and doesn't give people an excuse to get rid of jobs. So, I mean, you could do $25 minimum wage and think of some regional variation. But I think the impetus to drive the minimum wage up is really crucial and hugely necessary. Just in much of the land mass of the country, it is still $7.25, just as a reminder. So think about what that's like. In most of the South, it's still $7.25. In much of the West, it's still $7.25. And I think that is outrageous, frankly, in this day and age.
Elimination of capital gains and mortgage interest, one basic income tax rate, and similar to what Reagan did.
I think the country, over the last 20 years, has seen a big increase in wealth that goes towards capital versus labor. And I mean, there's been some studies that show when you really raise capital gains that, people play games around that. But fundamentally, I think we should not have this big differential between capital gains and traditional income that benefits very wealthy Americans.
Last one, alternative minimum tax of 50% for anyone making over, say, $3 million a year.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think what I'd say here, and you've talked about this yourself. I think we have a real kind of cancer in the country in declining opportunity. And I'll also say, we had Raphael Warnock here at CAP a few months ago, and he was talking about essentially a spiritual crisis in the country. And he identified it really with a sense that millions of Americans, most Americans, in fact, don't think that they have a real fair shot in the country. And they might think that because it's true that upward mobility has really declined. We have less economic mobility than Canada, almost half. We have less than most countries in Europe. This was a country that used to be a place where you could go as far as your talents can take you. So I think we have to transform our institutions to make them put that issue, like opportunity for every American, at the heart of what they do. And those ideas are part of that.
Last question for me, just along the lines of the lightning round. What do you think of the idea of the notion of mandatory national service?
I love it. I wish we could get it done tomorrow.
I would add one proposal to the lightning round. This has gotten a lot of attention recently. It's very controversial. It was proposed in California, and that is a wealth tax. Specifically, the one that was proposed in California would be a one-time 5% wealth tax on billionaires. Basically, for those wondering what is a wealth tax, it's just take your net worth and lop off 5%. What do you think of wealth taxes? Do you think they make sense? Do you think they will address inequality? What do you make of them?
Well, I think it's hard to do at a state level. I would say that. I think the fundamental impetus to me is how you address the inequality in the country. And I want to say a little bit more about that, which is I think we've had an important conversation about inequality for over, 15 years. Piketty's book came out like 15 years ago. And I think that we lose sight of how it's a corrosive effect, not just on our economy, but our democracy. I mean, and that billionaires today have the ability to have a billion times wealth of other people is one thing, but they also have a billion times more political power. So I think it is very corrosive. Now, I hate to be a policy wonk here, but there is some concern that a Supreme Court will never approve of a wealth tax because we needed an amendment to even get an income tax.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, the most important question is what ideas can we have, which there are many, to reduce the kind of overwhelming political power and economic power of the very wealthiest people in America. And I would just also note, if you just look at, say, the 1995 tax code, okay, it was in the heart of the Clinton administration. It had pretty high taxes, and the economy was doing very well. Okay, we were still able to have a tech boom. We had pretty high tax rates on income. We had pretty high tax rates on the highest end, and on capital gains. And we didn't do these 3 rounds of tax cuts that George Bush did on dividends and all these other things. We're just a wealth of areas that we have cut taxes on over the last 20 to 30 years that we could undo without the Supreme Court challenge or other challenge that a wealth tax would raise. And so it might be easier to start doing those and see where we land up.
I mean, yeah, I think this is hitting on what Scott often talks about, which is the difference between being right and effective. And, maybe a wealth transfer fixes things, just a one-time wealth tax, but is it actually going to get done? To your point, probably, almost definitely not. Are you proposing higher taxes in general, just higher tax rates? What are some of the ideas that you think are more likely to happen that would be more effective, more probable than a wealth tax?
So I think we should start with what our values are, right? Like, I think, we should reward merit in our country. We should ensure that, people can rise, et cetera. We shouldn't make it so much easier to have benefits of capital over labor. You should reward work. So if you, those values to me mean that you would eliminate things like stepped-up basis, which is a way in which really wealthy people kind of hide money from taxes and enrich their heirs. You should have a higher estate tax, in my view. You should have raised capital gains. Increase, not lower taxes on dividends. There's just a whole range of ways the tax code, particularly over the last 30 years, has benefited super wealthy Americans and benefited capital over labor. People are investing instead of people who are working paycheck to paycheck. And from my perspective, I think we should start. I think we should have a rich debate about a wealth tax, sure. But it's complicated. It's really hard to do. People can still hide assets and income. And so I think we could just start off making the tax code a lot fairer by unrigging it in many ways that it's been rigged over 30, at least particularly the last 30 years.
If you were the emperor of America for a day, so there's no Congress, there's no checks, no balances, you can basically just do whatever you want, you've got a day to do it. What would you change in the law? What would you implement and why?
I would ensure that we built mixed income housing in the suburbs and wealthier parts of America. And I'll say why I think that. Essentially what we've learned about poverty in America is that people who have access to like wealthier places, poorer people who have access to wealthier places, their upward mobility goes up like this. Rod Shetty has done a lot of work in this space. And, to be candid, this actually is a bit the story of my life. My parents got divorced when I was really young. My father left just as a kind of accident of policy. Massachusetts had passed this encouragement of low-income housing in suburban areas. My mom was able to move into an apartment. We had really good schools. If she didn't have that apartment in a middle-class town, I could have grown up in a place where no one went to a college. I grew up in a place where everyone went to college. I went to college. I went to eventually law school. And I'm here because of all those decisions. So if I could change one thing in America just for a day, there'd be a lot of opposition from some wealthy homeowners, but I would have a system in America where we integrated housing a lot more, allowed much more mixed income housing in places that are wealthier in the country. And I think you'd have a lot more opportunity for everyone.
Neera Tanden is the president and CEO of the Center for American Progress. Before leading American Progress, Tanden was the domestic policy advisor to President Joe Biden and director of the Domestic Policy Council, overseeing some of the administration's signature achievements, including its efforts to lower the cost of prescription drugs and expand health insurance coverage. Previously, she was senior advisor and staff secretary in the White House. Neera, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Prof G Markets from Prof G Media. If you liked what you heard, give us a follow and join us for a fresh take on markets on Monday.